right, let's talk about sleep and dreams. The really great thing about sleep is that no matter who you are, where you live, where you're from, everybody sleeps. So it's kind of one of those things that brings every human together, as well as other organisms. We all sleep, we all need rest. What's crazy is just a kind of fun little tidbit is that dolphins and porpoises actually don't sleep all at once. They sleep with half their brain at a time. So it's kind of an interesting little fun fact. All right, let's talk about sleep. During sleep, something interesting that we've learned is that our perceptual window is not completely closed. So have you ever noticed that a mother can hear her baby crying in the other room, but yet can sleep through a really loud truck kind of driving down the street? Another example is how we don't fall off the bed. We know where the bed is. Even if we're a tosser and a turner, we don't fall off the bed. That's another example of how our perceptual window is not closed. Thanks to new technology, we have like EEGs and things like that. We have been able to find that our auditory cortex still responds to noises and sounds, even when we're sleeping. All right, let's talk about our circadian rhythm. We have all these different rhythms of our body, just like the ocean and the tide has a different rhythm that it follows. Our circadian rhythm, it's about a 24-hour cycle. So this is going from day to night to day again. We actually go through different temperature changes throughout this circadian rhythm. During different periods of the day, we actually our body temperature actually goes up and down. As the morning goes up, or as the morning approaches, our body temperature goes up. It peaks during the day and it dips down in the afternoon. So have you ever noticed that? My sister studied abroad in Spain, and everybody in Europe pretty much takes what's called a siesta. So even the stores will close, and it's just a common thing. In the afternoon, everybody goes home and takes a nap. It's a siesta, and it's because our body temperature drops just like it does in the evening. So it's really interesting. Have you ever noticed that when your body temperature is up, that's actually when you're sharpest. You're able to think the most, the clearest, and your memory is the most awake and alert. When you pull an all-nighter, it kind of throws off your circadian rhythm, but you still will kind of get your second wind in the morning. So around 4 a.m. you're going to be just completely exhausted, but then come 7 or 8 when the sun's bright and clear, you're kind of going to get another second wind and be able to push forth and go take that test or finish that assignment right up. Okay, we have these little crazy retinal proteins that are actually sensitive to light. And what happens is they take in this light, and they have control over our circadian clock, because then they trigger what's called our SCN, or our suprachiasmatic nucleus. And our suprachiasmatic nucleus is this little pair of grain of rice-sized 20,000 cell clusters that live in our hypothalamus. So if you remember back in Unit 2, I believe, we learned about the hypothalamus and how it helps us with sleep, right? Well, here's how. We have this little thing called our SCN inside of there. And our SCN produces this hormone called melatonin. So what happens is we take in light, and these proteins tell our SCN to stop doing what it's doing, which then tells our pineal gland to stop what it's doing, and it stops producing melatonin. So it goes from these retinal producing proteins to our SCN, which then tells our pineal gland to stop, and melatonin stops. Melatonin is what makes us kind of sleepy so that we can fall asleep. There's now a ton of herbs and over-the-counter stuff where you can buy supplements of melatonin to help you sleep, but more than likely what people need is to make sure that they're in a dark room. So a lot of people now, they'll watch TV to fall asleep, and what could be happening is the light from the TV is tricking themselves to believe it's still daytime and continue producing melatonin, and they won't produce melatonin themselves, and they can't fall asleep. So it all kind of makes sense, right? So what we need to do, and what's become a huge problem ever since Thomas Edison made the light bulb, is that our brain is confused between whether it's day or night because we have this constant artificial light. So we're constantly telling our pineal gland, or our SCN, to tell our pineal gland to produce melatonin because it's daytime. And so we're continually producing it and unable to then fall asleep. The cool thing about knowing about this is that if you're doing something like flying from here to Europe and you've got that weird thing where you can't fall asleep, that jet lag, because your circadian rhythm is all messed up, what you can do is you can use this knowledge to your benefit. So what researchers have found is that by spending the entire day, even though your body thinks it's night, spending that entire day outside and getting in all that light, it can reset your circadian rhythm so that you can fall asleep that night. So you got to spend a lot of time with a lot of bright light to reset that clock. All right, so back in 1952, there was this researcher. His name was Armand Ariansky. And what he did was he used his kid as his research subject, which is kind of interesting. So he bought this new machine, which is now known as an EEG, and he set his son up to it and had his son go to sleep. So while he was sleeping, he looked at the results and he noticed that it was going crazy, like the machine was out of control, and it completely freaked him out. He thought the machine was broken. So he woke up his son and he went through it and everything looked fine. So he tried it again the next night. And he noticed that during parts of the night, it reoccurred again and the machine would just go crazy. So he woke up his son one time in the middle of that weird freak out session of the EEG, and his son was telling him all about these dreams he was having. So what we know now is he was in the REM cycle, which we'll talk about in just a second. So let's talk about the stages of sleep. The first stage of sleep is being awake. So you can't fall asleep unless you're awake first, right? So when you're awake, you have these alpha waves, these really active brain waves that show that your body is active, or your mind and your brain is active. And when you start to fall asleep, or you're getting into that mode of relaxation, you have alpha waves, which your brain waves start slowing down. During stage 1 of sleep, you're still showing alpha waves on the EEG. This stage 1 of sleep, it's a very short period of time, and it's kind of what I think is the most interesting because I see it the most often, because it's that period of time when you're in class and you're assigned something you don't want to do, and so you put your head down or you put your hand on your elbow, and all of a sudden you feel like you're falling and you jump up and then you look to see who saw. Totally been that person. I've done that. That is because during stage 1, when you're just falling asleep, you're likely to hallucinate or have these hallucinogenic-like type of sensations where you think you're falling when you're not, or you think that somebody's pushing you over or something like that. So that's actually very common, and that means that you're in that first stage of sleep where you're just starting to fall asleep. A little fun fact for you, when you yawn, especially when you're awake right before stage 1, what you're doing is you're actually stretching your neck and your neck muscles, and it's actually raises your heart rate, which then raises your alertness, and it is actually contagious. So your body sees someone else do it, and it kind of checks itself and then decides to do it itself. So it's kind of a fun little fact. All right, stage 2. Stage 2, at this point, you're going through some things called sleep spindles. If you look at your EEG, you have these bursts of rapid brainwave activities. So during this time, you can still be awakened really easily, but you are definitely asleep. So this stage lasts about 20 minutes. So, oops, I'm sorry. All right, stage 3. Stage 3 is a pretty short sleep stage. It's kind of a transitional stage between that light sleep of stage 2 and going into the deep sleep of stage 4. So it only lasts about a few minutes. And then sleep 4 has what's called delta waves. And delta waves are really large, slow waves on an EEG. So it shows that your brain is not as active. You're in this really deep sleep. That's the period of time where it's really hard to wake somebody up, where your mom the next day can ask you, did you hear that thunderstorm last night? And you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about, because you're in that deep delta sleep. Another thing that you can kind of think about with delta sleep is, because you're in that deep sleep, this is commonly when like kids will sleepwalk or pee their pants in the middle of the night, because they're in such a deep sleep that they're unaware. So, okay, here's a little look at what EEGs look like during different stages of sleep. So here you can see the quick movements of the alpha waves. Although you're in a relaxed state, you're still moving around. Here you can see stage 1 is very similar to the alpha waves. Stage 2, you get those bursts of activities, those sleep spindles. Stage 3, they start to lengthen. And stage 4, they're even deeper. Longer, deeper brain waves, showing that you're in a deep sleep. And now we're going to get to the REM sleep. The REM sleep is really interesting because you'll have movements similar to the delta waves at times, and then you'll have, during the actual eye movement phase, you'll have really fast, sporadic waves. And then you'll have some things that look very, very similar to those spindles, those bursts of activity. So if I was to characterize what the wavelengths look like for REM sleep, I would say it looks very similar to stage 2 with bursts of activity, with some real spastic wavelengths during the eye movement phase. So that would be the easiest way to characterize them. All right, let's talk about REM sleep versus non-REM sleep. So stages 1 through 4 are kind of considered non-REM sleep. REM sleep has what's called paradoxical sleep, and what that means is your insides, inside of your mind, is very, very active during REM sleep. This is when you dream. If you're 80% of people that are awoken during REM sleep can remember their dreams. This is when it happens, and everyone dreams. It's just that not everyone remembers them. So REM sleep, your insides, your mind is very, very active. But what's really, really interesting about REM sleep is that your body is not. It's they call it almost like a paralyzed state. So your motor cortex is still really, really active, but your brainstem blocks those messages from coming through. So what's great about this is, even though we're having these really vivid, really intense emotional dreams that have very elaborate stories, which differ from stage 1, because the stage 1 dreams are more hallucinogenic and they're very short, just almost like images thrown out at us. But during the REM sleep, they're very drawn out story-like dreams. But what's great about being paralyzed during this time is we don't act them out. So that's something that's very important to note. We do not act out our dreams during REM sleep. That's not what's happening when you're moving. During REM sleep, you're not moving. You may have an occasional twitch of your fingers or your legs, kind of more of a muscle reaction, but it's not in concert in any way to your dreams. So let's see. Alright, so what happens as you sleep, you can kind of see here, as the night goes on, your REM cycle actually gets longer. You almost completely shut down other cycles of your brain. So stage 4, you can see, actually gets shorter and shorter until it completely disappears during the night. And your REM cycle in stage 2 get longer and longer. So by the end of the night, you're just cycling through stage 2 and stage 4. Of course, hopefully you've caught on that stage 1 is the process of falling asleep. So you're not going to continue to have stage 1 again. after the first time. So you'll go through stage 1 the first time. You'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the next, and then after about an hour, then you'll experience REM, and then you'll go back to 2, 3, 4, and